Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find the tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. All right, welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
And as always, we thank our patrons for supporting this podcast. It's because of you that we are able to do this.
Right. And yes, we are thankful.
Yeah.
Very thankful.
And I guess I can plug some exciting news. We have some awesome guests coming up in the very near future. We have Judge Aquilina from the infamous Larry Nassar sentencing, who's going to be with us soon. And we have Wade Mullen, who is he's going to be interviewing with us, and that will air probably the end of September or beginning of October. So we're excited that that's coming up. Very excited.
Those are going to be two great guest episodes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we have several who are in the works that are tentatively scheduled. We just have to solidify them. So until they're solidified, I will withhold their names and keep you hanging on the edge of your seat.
Absolutely. Yeah. There you go.
So today's episode, we're going to talk about what leaders should do, 5 steps that leaders should do if there's an allegation of abuse. And that would be a credible allegation, that could be any kind of abuse. I mean, we talk about sexual abuse because that's what we specialize in.
Right.
That's been our personal experience. Mm-hmm. That's where my research has been focused, is on sexual abuse of minors, but we're really talking about any kind of abuse. Spiritual abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse of adults, sexual abuse of minors, whatever kind of abuse it is. If there's an allegation of abuse, a credible allegation, or a suspicion of abuse, here are 5 steps that I think are really important for church leaders to do. And part of what fueled this episode is that I see churches get this wrong almost always. Right now, Menlo Church in California with John Ortberg, they're going through, all kinds of trouble because of something that was handled in-house. They hired an investigator, and it ended up being, somebody who was cherry-picked and just kind of did a halfway job. They didn't communicate hardly anything to the congregation, very little transparency, and it's a mess right now.
It always is, Jimmy, when we put a veil, a cover, a sheet across the truth, and we only show partial. That never turns out okay.
Nope.
Never. So I think this is going to be really incredibly helpful to those who are listening, especially to those who are in a leadership position.
Yeah. And I'll say for myself, I didn't have this information available.
Right.
When I was 2 years into ministry, July 29th, that's what, 9 years? 9 years to the day that you and I found out. That there was this allegation of abuse. My youngest sister came to me and disclosed abuse. So we're talking 9 years, July 29th, which I think is the date of this. We don't record on the date that we publish these, so I have to think, what's Thursday's date? Today's
I have to stop and think, too. 28th? I don't know what
that's tomorrow.
Is.
Okay,
tomorrow,
so tomorrow, July 29th, 9 years. And I think back, it is miraculous that I was able to think through and process through how to handle this, because we didn't have a group of church leaders at the time. We didn't have elders, we didn't have deacons, and we're independent churches.
Right.
And so there was no leadership structure that was in place where I could contact people and bounce ideas off of, which maybe it was a good thing, really, when I see how churches
probably
handle
it was, Jimmy, because you based your action. I based my action. Your sister based her action on
morality.
That the truth always wins. We needed to be truthful from minute one.
Yeah,
and that worked.
And I'll say too, and this is one of our 5 steps here, but I never ever worried about protecting the image of the church. That was never a thought.
Right.
And I literally thought, here sits a victim in front of me. Whether I was related to her or not was irrelevant.
Right.
The fact is, here's somebody who was oppressed, who was abused in the worst possible way. I'm going to do something about it. I have to do something about it.
And I think you and I and your sister will always appreciate that fact, that there was no hesitancy.
No.
There was no
Never.
trying to hide.
Nope.
Because of embarrassment or...
Nope. And embarrassing it was.
It was terribly embarrassing. But
there was no shrinking back
times. And there is no shrinking back. It was something that needed to be exposed and dealt with right then and there.
Yeah. So a lot of this is, personal experience, probably above and beyond anything that I've learned since. But the things that I've learned since have only enhanced these steps and really made me decide that what we did was absolutely the correct and proper
and the right thing.
Method. Okay, so number 1, what can church leaders do? And this isn't just churches. This is, really any organization. I say churches because it's where I work. It's where I'm employed. And it's just that, this can apply across any organization. Okay, number 1. Leaders should distance themselves from the abusive behavior when there are allegations. Unequivocally, undeniably, you should stand up very loudly, very boldly, and say, here are the allegations, and they are wrong. This behavior is wrong. This language is wrong. There is nothing about these allegations that is holy, that is true, that is defendable, period.
Now, what do you mean by distancing yourself from the abusive behavior?
Yeah,
Explain that.
Yeah, so what a lot of churches do, they sanitize the language, and they'll say, they'll use generalizations. Well, there were some things that were said. It's this real vague, and nobody has a clue in the congregation.
Very vague. And
nobody
I
has a clue.
Some people came to us.
It's this really softball approach.
It is. Yeah.
Instead of naming the allegations, saying, here's what the allegations are.
Right.
When I reported to my church, before he was even arrested,
I know.
I said, I still remember this. I said, there are multiple allegations that my dad sexually abused minor children. And I said, at this point, I don't know a lot, so I can't say a lot, but I will tell you that we have the best reason to believe that these allegations are true. And I don't want anybody in this congregation to rush to my dad's defense. Don't do it.
That took courage beyond what we can even imagine, Jimmy. When I think back 9 years ago, you were a kid. You were young.
Well, I'm still young.
You'll always be a kid in my eyes. But you were a kid. You were green. You had just been in ministry for a short while.
2 years.
And here is all of this stuff laid on you. Not only was this an allegation, but it was an allegation of someone that you loved with all your heart.
Yeah.
Someone you respected, and the very reason you were in ministry.
Yeah.
So I want people to really get it, what you're talking about.
Yeah, protecting the image of the church and protecting a family member whom I loved and adored and, practically worshiped the ground he walked on.
Right.
That was irrelevant. When you have right and wrong, and it's very black and white, I mean, there's no gray area in this. It's not like you can't sanitize child sexual abuse or any kind of abuse in any capacity and say, well, but he's a good guy and think of all the good that he did. You can't do it.
No.
It is black and white.
Yes, but
there's right and there's wrong.
Think about his childhood. Think about what he went through. That's often used too. Mm-hmm. Think about what his life was like and think about what the other person did to him. Or no, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, the point is
it doesn't.
Criminal felonies were committed.
Right.
Allegedly.
Mm-hmm. Which you stated.
There was a very credible disclosure to me personally, right. And I named it. Mm-hmm. I said, just know what he did was wrong,
right,
and do not defend him.
Mm-hmm. Should this be true? I mean, you're still talking allegation.
Right, yeah, and I said,
and you did.
There will be due course. Right. There was an investigation. We're going to cooperate with legal authorities. So, number one, you distance yourself as leaders. Distance yourself from the abusive behavior, and I would say too from the abuser.
Right, that's critically important.
Number two, name the person and the specific allegation or accusation, even if it's at that point you don't know a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's still really important to name the person and to name the allegation. Not, well, there was something that came up, or, people were talking, and so, we just have to address this because people are talking about something. Well, gee, that narrows it down.
Right.
That really helps to protect people if the allegations are true. And that's the point. It's important to know who the person is so that people have a fighting chance to protect their own families.
Mm-hmm.
And a prime example, and one that I thought of, a recent example, is John Crist, the famous Christian comedian, who was abusing multiple women in horrific ways,
mm-hmm.
Getting them flat out trashed and drunk and to where they were passed out, and he was taking advantage of them, much against their wills.
Mm-hmm.
Just on and on and on. He had so many victims, and people knew about this, and people kept booking him. Organizations kept booking him knowing this, and they enabled him. And instead of naming him and naming what the allegations were, they were like, oh, well, one, they just didn't talk about it.
Right.
There were a handful of us online.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Kenny Stubblefield was the first person I saw who said, I'm telling you firsthand that I have spoken to victims who have told me what John Crist did to them.
Mm-hmm.
This is fact. He was putting it all over Twitter.
And that's what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Is fact. Yes. I'm going to interject something. I can't think of his name. The guy on the Today Show that was fired.
Oh, Matt Lauer.
Matt Lauer. Yeah. We're talking about a different type of abuse, but there again, it was. Do you think that was handled properly?
No, people knew. People knew. His bosses knew. Multiple victims had reported him over the years.
Right. And he was protected.
Absolutely.
And he was protected. And the abuse continued.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He produced more and more victims. His coworkers were quiet. His bosses were quiet. And then when it all came out, they were like, oh my goodness, how could this have happened?
Right.
I'll tell you how it happened.
And there you go. There you go.
Nobody
it was
named
allowed
him
to happen. Right.
Nobody named the allegations.
He was kept in the veil of secrecy.
Right.
He was covered.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why it's important. And, I even put this statement down. I think a statement like this is really appropriate when you're naming the person and the allegation. You can say something like this. At this juncture, we don't know if the allegations are true, but we are looking into it, and we want to be as transparent as possible. We will always err on the side of caution and transparency. That should be the statement.
Yeah, I
right
appreciate
there.
it that you put that, Jimmy, and that should be the statement. You're not saying this is what happened. You're saying we have an allegation.
Right.
Not sure
and we're
yet.
And here's what the allegation is.
Here's
and here's who's named
right
as the alleged abuser, and we're going to look into this. And if it turns out to be nothing, then we will stand by this person.
That's
and,
all.
You know, whatever.
Yes.
But yeah, name the person. And, you know, I hear all the time, well, what if we ruin a perfectly good person's reputation?
That won't
and
happen.
I say, what if that person ruins a perfectly good person's life?
You're right. And that's exactly what happens in cases of abuse.
Right?
We've seen it over and over and over again.
Yeah. Number 3, do not hinder members from expressing their concerns. For example, allow them to talk freely. Let them know that communication is important and that communication is not the same thing as gossip. Time after time after time after time, I hear church leaders say, they'll shut down any kind of talk and they'll say, we don't want any gossip about, you know, brother so-and-so.
Right.
Well, there's a difference between gossip and communication. And I think we need to make that distinction. And that distinction is really important. Okay. So gossip is nitpicking and or making up or exaggerating information about a person. That's gossip. And it's wrong. We should never gossip about people.
Terribly wrong. It's terribly harmful, but there is a big dividing line between gossip and speaking
Absolutely.
the truth. Yes.
So communication is when you're sharing valuable and useful information that helps warn people of abusive behavior. That is not gossip, and that should be encouraged. Right. And at our congregation, we do this periodically, but all of the leaders will stand up before the church and we'll say, we want you guys to physically look at the people standing up here. Every one of us is a mandated reporter by law. By Pennsylvania law, we're all mandated reporters. You can and you should go to any one of us, any one of us, whichever one of us you're most comfortable with.
That's great.
We will listen to an allegation.
Okay.
We have another team of people who will be notified. And if it's illegal activity, illegal abuse, whoever you go to, no matter who's standing up here, that person will report it immediately.
That's awesome.
Our congregation knows that.
That's awesome.
And we say, if any one of these people here you're not comfortable with, because we have all male leaders.
Right.
We say, we have other designated people within the congregation who are not part of this leadership team who you can go to and you can tell, and they will come tell us.
Don't you think that helps all the way around, Jimmy?
Absolutely.
To create an atmosphere of trust?
Absolutely, it does.
It really does. When we know that there are sound, moral, good people that are our leaders, immediately we want to entrust them with our concerns, our worries, our heartaches, our, whatever it is. But that's a really good thing. Yeah.
So, I think I see this time and time and time again where churches they'll shut down any kind of communication among members and say, the leaders got this. We got this. We're handling this. That's not transparent. It's not honest.
Private meetings.
Yeah. It's not moral. It's not ethical.
Right. No.
And they should welcome congregants to give information to them that's important, that's relevant.
Absolutely. Especially in cases of abuse, because we're not, we're not always looking and seeing and feeling and
we can't be.
Cannot be. So we depend on the help from others.
Yeah, when leaders say, we're going to be the eyes and the ears of the church, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Because everybody is the eyes and the ears.
Or we will handle it in our meetings. We will take this to the elders meeting and we'll handle it.
Right. I made this point too. A lot of churches ban church members from talking on social media, and then they'll scour any negative post about the church. Delete your post, get rid of it. And we want to be clear here. We want to make a distinction between explosive backtalk and backbiting and gossip, which is wrong, which shouldn't happen. Right. Church members should not do that. That's not helpful. No. That's not moral. That's not ethical. But there's a difference between passing information or asking for information in a neutral, unbiased way, as best as you can.
Or
be
alerting
objective. or alerting other people.
There's an allegation against a leader, and he's going from church to church, as was the case of
notifying another church is not gossip.
Right. That is not gossip. That is saying, hey, there's an investigation going on. There are allegations going on. We just want to give you a heads up. Not sure what the result is going to be, but here's a heads up.
But a lot of churches will shut down any kind of talk from any of their members. Hear of it. Yeah. And they'll tell them, they'll make announcements. We don't want you putting anything online.
We've had podcast after podcast about that happening.
Yeah.
That very thing happening.
And I would also say this under this third point here, if a church is hiding abuse, posts online are going to be negative. If leaders confront abuse, and they're transparent, posts about the church are going to be positive for the most part.
If it's done,
members are going to say, you know what, we appreciate that our leaders are open, that they're nipping this in the bud, that they're taking care of it, that they're being transparent. Your members will appreciate that. Okay. Point number 4. Leaders should provide an avenue for potential victims to safely report abusive behavior. And with this caveat, never ever encourage them to approach the abusive person. Don't appeal to Matthew 18 and say, well, the Bible says you need to, go talk to them. If you have a problem with them, go talk to them. Jesus, in his most insane mind, if he ever was insane, which he wasn't, but he would never suggest to a victim of oppression to go to their oppressor. No. And appeal to Matthew 18.
I don't think so. Not going to work, is it?
It's not smart.
No.
It's not good advice.
It's not biblical. It doesn't. No.
It's awful advice.
Yes.
So the alternative to that, the safe alternative to that should be, if anybody has been harmed, if anybody else who we don't know about has been harmed by this person, name the name. Mm-hmm. Again, here's a group of people who you can come talk to, and I promise you won't be shut down. We will listen to you. We will believe you. We will call proper authorities if anything illegal has happened. We will take care, and we will keep your name confidential.
And that needs to happen too. There needs to be that bond of trust.
Yeah, the victim has to have that
bond,
assurance.
Yes, for sure. This whole thing, can explode if not handled properly.
Yeah, and we see it time and time again.
Absolutely. And it does turn into then a match of protection for the abuser, the alleged person.
Or the organization, or both.
Or both, right. And then you have the abused people who will never carry the truth again to anybody.
Right.
Because
why would they?
Why would they? It's like a second puncture to the heart here.
Yeah.
When they're not listened to, when proper action isn't taken. So I love how you've laid this out very clearly, step by step, what the process should be. And it is a process. It is a process.
And honestly, it's painful. It's embarrassing. It's nobody wants to confront this kind of garbage. No. Nobody wants to think about it. Nobody wants to talk about it.
We know
nobody wants to stand in front of their congregation and announce and admit that this went on and we didn't recognize it. Nobody wants to do that. But these 5 steps are not that hard.
No, they're not. They're
not that complicated.
In the end, wow, is it better?
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely
it is better. To lay it out, deal with it.
Yeah.
Deal with it, find the truth, and take it from there.
Yeah.
Right.
And then finally, number 5, this is vital. Protect the value of human souls and not the reputation of the church. If we're trying to defend the reputation of the church, if that's the first thought that comes to your mind, is that we don't want anybody saying anything bad about the church, those leaders ought to be removed immediately.
It's weird. The church is supposed to be a gathering of sinners. We all are, worshiping our Lord, and we are supposed to confess our sins and deal with them. And we are broken people, admittedly, but there's this facade that is put on that it's just one big, happy, wonderful family with rah, rah, shish kebab. God is good all the time. All the time, God is good. Nothing bad ever happens to me. That's not true. That's not how life is within our physical families, let alone within our church families.
Yeah. One of the biggest fights that I ever got into with my elders, and we talk openly about this with our church, with each other. We're very open. We don't always get along. We fight like cats and dogs.
Well, who does in any relationship? Right.
But I respect them. I don't agree with them on a lot of things, but I respect them, and they don't agree with me on a lot of things, and they respect me.
Right.
That's why I can talk freely about this, and they don't mind. I mean, we've talked publicly about this. Right. Christine Parker published a post on Porch Swing Ministries where she interviewed me and my elders, because I'm telling you, I almost resigned so many times. They almost resigned from being elders. So all that to say, one of the biggest fights that I had with them is, they were kind of picking at me on things and had their checklist of issues. And in my mind, they're just being petty. In their mind, they're, trying to get me to, these were big issues for them. And so anyway, they finally turned around and said, "Do you have any criticism about us?" And I was like, "Are you really opening this door for me? Like, are you honestly opening this door for criticism? Because you're not going to like what you hear." Yeah. And they said, to their credit, we want to know.
And that is much to their credit.
I said,
by the way.
"Okay, thank you." And the floodgates opened up, and I'm not proud of this moment, but it was on my mind, and they gave me permission, and and to their credit, again, they took it. And, they repented. I repented. We prayed together. All was good. Okay. Right. So one of my biggest criticisms was when you guys step foot over the threshold of this church building, our members see a different persona than they see in the grocery store. You guys change into this mode of all of a sudden now we're the leaders of the church. And I'm like, what is that? Did you ever see Jesus go around and change did you see him walk into the synagogue and be like, okay, now using these and thous and the language changes. All of you who are listening know what I'm talking about. Right?
Absolutely.
You walk into church and all of a sudden you can feel the fake. So that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly.
Protecting this image.
Exactly.
This whitewashing of the church.
Be real.
Where we want to have this facade.
Right.
My thing is, when I walk in, people know what you see
Jimmy.
Is what you get.
You are Jimmy. Wherever you are, I don't see you change. And I love that.
Yeah.
People love that. We need that.
Yeah.
We need to be able to see each other, whether we're in our home, in the grocery store, in a movie theater, wherever, that we are who we are, who we are.
Yeah.
That's so important.
So protecting the reputation of the church, or our own reputation. Our reputation as church leaders.
Right.
It's wrong. It's wrong. Right. So, damage control is dishonest because it focuses on whitewashing the public image of the church while covering for someone who has abused victims. If that's the case, if you're a leader who's doing that, hopefully we have church leaders who listen to this. And I'm preaching to the choir here too. I'm not preaching at people.
No.
I'm talking to myself
it's
too.
Across the board.
If you're ever at
a
point, if you're ever at a point where you're focusing on your reputation above the human value of other human souls, resign. Step down and resign from that position.
When we made the decision to go to the police with your dad, abuse wasn't heard of like it is today. Now it's almost to the point of being common. People report every day. People's names are in the paper every day. It was not so when we did this. Mm-mm. A flashing thought came through my mind when I had your sister go talk to you. And that thought was, my gosh, our whole family will be destroyed. It's going to be so different if this is true, and the whole world, and it does feel like the whole world knows when we are exposed.
We exposed ourselves.
Right. But it was this idea of the value of human souls was so much deeper. Thank God. Mm-hmm. Thank God. I don't always get it right. In fact, most of the time I don't get anything right, truthfully.
Yeah.
But this one
you're right about that.
Thanks. Notice the support I get from my child. Notice this. Did you notice how quick he came and supported
Episode
me?
112.
Yeah. Thanks.
All the things Clara Hinton does wrong.
Yeah. Thank you, Jimmy. But I mean it, that it's scary to expose ourselves, our family, our church. It's very scary.
It's very vulnerable.
It's very vulnerable. But until we're real, I don't think we have the real unit, the real communication, the real fellowship that we need anyway.
Yeah.
It's fake. Like
I mean, look at what Jesus said often, over and over and over, about people being whitewashed tombs. Mm-hmm. You're rotten inside. You're dead. There's this rotting.
You look real nice on the outside,
yeah,
guys.
But on the outside, by golly, boy,
perfume
are you nice and white.
Good. Nails are done. Hair is done. Mm-hmm. But inside, it sure stinks.
Yeah, and he was having none of it. And he was like, no, be you.
Right.
Be who you are. Be real. Don't change persona when you walk across the threshold and you walk into your synagogue, or you walk into your church, or you walk
this is wherever. Who we should be, valuing the state of the human soul, worshiping our God, and trusting God in the end to take care of it all. Mm-hmm. Really. Trusting God that when the truth is exposed, that God will be there. Yeah. And he is.
Absolutely. Well, we have a very simple truth bomb for today. 2 words: be transparent. Be honest. Put it out there. Yeah, be transparent. Be real. Communicate with your church. Do it well. And things will go much better, I promise. Thank you for tuning into this episode. We'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.